Wild Prairie Rose by Audrey Sinclair. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1875. Emma Hartford pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she hurried toward the general store, her boots clicking against the wooden sidewalk. The spring air still held winter's bite, but it was the townspeople's stares that truly made her shiver. 6 months had passed since she'd arrived to take ownership of her late uncle's store, and still the whispers followed her like tumbleweeds. An unmarried woman running a business was scandal enough in Silver Creek, but an educated Boston girl who spoke her mind, that was nearly unforgivable. Emma raised her chin and straightened her spine as she approached the store's entrance. The morning's inventory wouldn't count itself, and she had orders to fill before. The thundering of hooves drew her attention to the street. A group of riders approached, dust billowing behind them like storm clouds. At their head rode a man whose very presence seemed to command the sun itself to pause in its westward journey. Lucas Hawke. The name whispered through her mind unbidden, just as it had every day since he'd first walked into her store 3 months ago. The notorious bounty hunter cut an impressive figure atop his black stallion, his broad shoulders wrapped in a worn leather duster, dark hair curling beneath his hat brim. Their eyes met across the distance, and Emma's heart performed the same foolish flutter it always did when he looked at her. She forced herself to turn away, fumbling with her key in the store's lock. "Miss Hartford." His deep voice reached her ears just as she managed to push open the door. Emma took a steadying breath before turning to face him. "Mr. Hawke, I trust your journey was successful?" Lucas dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size. "Found what I was looking for." He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small paper-wrapped package. "And something else besides." Emma's fingers brushed his as she accepted the package, sending a jolt of awareness through her that had nothing to do with the morning chill. "The coffee beans I requested? From that specialty merchant in Cheyenne you mentioned." His mouth curved in a half-smile that made her pulse skip. "Seemed ashamed to ride past without picking them up." "That's very thoughtful of you." Emma clutched the package to her chest, trying to ignore how his presence seemed to fill the entire doorway. "Though you needn't have gone to the trouble. I know bounty hunting is demanding work. Some things are worth the extra effort." His hazel eyes held hers for a moment too long to be purely polite. "Speaking of which, I heard talk in Cheyenne about a gang moving through these parts. Might be wise to hire some extra security for your store." Emma bristled at the implication. "I'm perfectly capable of handling." A commotion from the saloon across the street interrupted her protest. 2 men burst through the batwing doors, fists flying. Emma barely had time to register the flash of steel before Lucas moved, positioning himself between her and the street in one fluid motion. "Inside. Now." His tone brooked no argument as he guided her through the doorway, his hand warm against the small of her back. Emma wanted to object to his high-handedness, but the sharp crack of a gunshot made her jump. Lucas pulled the door shut behind them, and Emma found herself pressed between the solid wood of the door and the even more solid wall of his chest. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, concern evident in his features as he looked down at her. "I'm fine," Emma managed, though her heart was racing for reasons that had little to do with the gunfight outside. She was acutely aware of his proximity, of the clean scent of leather and soap that clung to him. "This isn't the first brawl I've witnessed in Silver Creek." "No," Lucas agreed, though he made no move to step back. "But it might not be a simple brawl this time. Those men who just rode in. I recognized one of them. He runs with the Morton gang." Emma's eyes widened. The Morton gang had been terrorizing banks and stagecoaches across the territory for months. What would they want in Silver Creek? "That's what I aim to find out." His expression hardened as another shot rang out, followed by shouting. "Promise me you'll be careful, Emma. Keep your doors locked after dark, and—" "I won't live in fear, Mr. Hawke." She lifted her chin, meeting his concerned gaze. "This store is all I have left of my family. I won't be driven away by criminals." Something flickered in his eyes, respect, perhaps, mixed with frustration. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, then surprised her by catching her hand in his. "At least promise me you'll send word if there's trouble. I'll be staying at the hotel for a few days." Emma's protest died on her lips as his thumb traced a gentle circle on her palm. Yes, all right, I promise." The gunfire had ceased, replaced by the sound of racing hoofbeats. Lucas finally stepped back, though his eyes remained on her face. "I should see what's happening out there. Stay inside until I return." This time Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. He gave her hand a final squeeze before slipping out the door, leaving her to press her cool fingers to her flushed cheeks. What was wrong with her? She'd come west to prove she could stand on her own, not to moon over a dangerous man like some swooning novel heroine. Even if said man's rare smiles made her knees weak, or the way he looked at her sometimes made her wonder if. No, Emma forced herself to move behind the counter, spreading out her ledger with perhaps more force than necessary. She had a business to run. She couldn't afford to be distracted by Lucas Hawke, no matter how his protective instincts stirred something warm in her chest. The next few days passed in a blur of tension. More strangers arrived in town, rough-looking men who loitered in the saloon and watched the street with predatory eyes. Emma kept her shotgun close at hand, though she noticed Lucas or one of his men seemed to be nearby whenever she opened or closed the store. It was late afternoon when everything changed. Emma was organizing a new shipment of dry goods when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up to find 3 men entering, none of them familiar, all of them armed. "Afternoon, ma'am," the leader drawled, his friendly tone at odds with the cold look in his eyes. Heard tell this was the best stocked store in town. Emma's hand inched toward the shotgun beneath the counter. "Can I help you find something specific?" "Oh, we'll just have a look around." The men spread out, making a show of examining merchandise while effectively boxing her in behind the counter. Quite a responsibility, running a place like this all alone. Shame if anything were to happen to it. Emma's fingers closed around the shotgun's smooth stock. "I manage well enough, thank you." "Course you do." The leader's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But times are dangerous. Might be worth considering some protection, for a reasonable fee." "I believe the lady already has protection." Lucas's quiet voice cut through the tension like a knife. He stood in the doorway, one hand resting casually on his gun belt. 2 more men, his deputies, Emma realized, flanked him. The leader's face hardened. "This is a private business discussion, Hawke." "Not anymore?" Lucas's tone remained conversational, but Emma saw steel in his eyes. "You boys have exactly 1 minute to ride out of town. After that I start taking things personal." For a moment, Emma thought the men would fight. Then the leader spat on her clean floor and jerked his head toward the door. "Another time, perhaps." "No," Lucas said softly as they filed past him. "There won't be." Emma sagged against the counter once they were gone, her legs suddenly weak. "How did you know?" "Been watching them." Lucas crossed to her, his hands gentle as they covered hers where they gripped the counter. "You all right?" She nodded, though she couldn't quite stop trembling. "They wanted protection money. I thought, when they came in." "I know." His thumb brushed her cheek, and Emma realized with horror that she was crying. "But it's over now. The Morton gang won't trouble Silver Creek again." "How can you be sure?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Because I've spent the last 3 days gathering evidence. The territorial marshal is riding in tonight with a dozen men. We'll round them up before they know what hit them." Relief made Emma's knees buckle. Lucas caught her against his chest, and she found herself clinging to his shirt front. "I was so frightened," she whispered. "Not of them exactly, but of losing everything I've built here. This store, my independence." "Emma." His voice was rough as he tipped her chin up. "Look at me." She did, reading something in his expression that made her heart stutter. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known," he said quietly. "The way you've made this store thrive, how you've won over this town, despite their prejudices, I've never seen anything like it. Or anyone like you." "Lucas," she hardly recognized her own voice. "I'm not asking you to give up your independence." His hands framed her face with infinite care. "But I am asking if there might be room in your life for a partner. Someone to stand beside you, not above you." Emma's breath caught. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words fell between them like rain on parched earth. "Your spirit, your courage, your stubborn determination to do things your own way. I love all of it. All of you." Joy bubbled up in Emma's chest, bright as sunrise. "Even when I'm being difficult." "Especially then." His smile was tender as he brushed away the last of her tears. "Though I'd appreciate it if you'd let me help keep you safe now and then." "I suppose I could allow that." Emma stretched up on her toes, her hands sliding to his shoulders. "Since I love you too." His kiss was everything she'd dreamed of and nothing like she'd imagined. It was strength and tenderness, passion and promise, the taste of adventure and the warmth of coming home. When they finally parted, Emma knew her life would never be the same. "Stay with me tonight," Lucas murmured against her hair. "Help me keep watch over the town. Tomorrow we'll deal with the gang, and then?" "And then?" His smile held all the promise of tomorrow. "And then we'll write our own story, my wild prairie rose. Together." Emma's answer was another kiss, sweet as spring rain and full of hope. Outside, the sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, a fitting backdrop for new beginnings. Silver Creek had brought her west in search of independence. But in Lucas's arms, she'd found something even more precious, a love that strengthened rather than diminished her spirit, and the promise of adventures yet to come.